So the fear to look within, the great promise for the spiritual journey is by recognizing the spirit within yourself, you will find inner peace, and this peace will extend to bless the world. When we turn towards our inner self, the ego responds fearfully and raises its shields. For the one thing the ego fears above all else is that you would forsake it and find your eternal self. Welcome to Miracles on High Plains. My name is Jonaca, your host, and our reader today is David S. We're going to review a few sentences from the previous section before we begin today's section. David?
The body was made to be a sacrifice to sin, and in the darkness, so it still is seen. Yet in the light of vision, it is looked upon quite differently. You can have faith in it to serve the Holy Spirit's goal and give it power to serve as means to help the blind to see. The Holy Spirit will never teach you that you are sinful. Errors he will correct, but this makes no one fearful. You are indeed afraid to look within and see the sin you think is there. This you would not be fearful to admit. Fear in association with sin, the ego deems quite appropriate and smiles approvingly. It has no fear to let you feel ashamed. It doubts not your belief and faith in sin. Its temples do not shake because of this. Your faith that sin is there, but witnesses to your desire that it be there to see. This merely seems to be the source of fear.
It seems to be the source of fear, but is not in actuality the source of fear. So we have these two contrasting viewpoints where the light of vision looks upon you and life quite differently than the ego. And what remains largely unconscious and hidden from us is these defensive barriers that the ego has in place. And it wants you to believe that you need its defense, that you need the ego to protect you. And so this is the task of the Holy Spirit, is to allow you to look at these ego defenses so that you will no longer believe in them, not give them your faith or your power, but know that it makes perfect sense that the ego is afraid to look within and see the light within you, and therefore convinces you to be afraid to look within. And what is it that the ego says? When you look within, you will find nothing. Lack of love, emptiness, darkness, abyss. That's the ego's propaganda, that when you do that, you will precipitate a nihilistic despair by looking within. So we want to unmask that fear, look at it rationally together in the light of the Holy Spirit, and simply dismiss it as having no truth to it at all. And by so doing, withdraw our power and faith from those beliefs and move forward in the light of vision. So Well, one more thing that will prove to be helpful as we go forward. The ego always uses a double layer of defenses. The first layer is the one you become conscious of, and the second layer is a defense that you're not conscious of. So in this instance, the source of fear is the first layer, seems to be that you would look within and find yourself unlovable. Here it uses the term look within and find yourself sinful. In the context of the Course in Miracles, sin is the belief that the world lacks love, that there is no love to be found. So it seems to fear seems to be that you would find yourself unlovable. Later on, we'll find the second defense system that is not so visible. Let's go on.
Remember that the ego is not alone. Its rule is tempered, and its unknown enemy, whom it cannot even see, it fears. Loudly, the ego tells you not to look inward, for if you do, your eyes will light on sin, and God will strike you blind. This you believe, and so you do not look. Yet this is not the ego's hidden fear, nor yours who serve it. Loudly indeed, the ego claims it is, too loudly and too often. For underneath this constant shout and frantic proclamation, the ego is not certain it is so. Beneath your fear to look within because of sin is yet another fear, and one which makes the ego tremble.
Okay, so what we're doing is we're bringing the light to where there is largely lack of awareness, lack of understanding. We said the first layer of fear is that if you look within, you'll find yourself not lovable. And by the way, this is not just a theory. If you wanted to, you could introspect and get in touch with the fear that you are not lovable. It's not required that you look at that. We're just stating that it's there and that around it, there tends to be great reservations to even look that way. So that's the outer shell. And yet there is another fear, one which really makes the ego afraid. That's what is really the topic of this section. Let's take a few comments. Kathy?
There is a lesson that addresses this. It's lesson 93, and I can put it in the chat. Light and joy and peace abide in me. I just thought I'd mention that.
And therein is the thing that makes the ego really tremble, the light and peace and joy that abide in you. And that you would discover that and identify with it. Noel?
What is meant by
Jonaca.
what is meant by the first sentence? Remember that the ego is not alone.
It's the idea, it's not the only voice in your mind. So the Holy Spirit is in your mind as well. The Holy Spirit is the unknown enemy of the ego, who the ego fears but cannot see. And therefore, the ego shouts its principles loudly in order to try to fill your attention and keep you away from Holy Spirit's voice.
Right, thank you. So it's not that the ego, he's not saying that the ego has relatives, offshoots of its own,
Right.
but rather it's the Holy Spirit
Yes.
that is the.
Yes, there's two voices in the mix here, two choices, and the ego doesn't want you to be aware of the other choice. Jerry, go ahead.
Maybe it's a long time getting to this question, but what if there, if anything, is there positive to say about the ego? Just curious. I mean, we hear a lot of, all the months I've been coming to y'all's meeting, I don't think that question popped to my head till this morning for some reason.
So if I'm going to answer that in kind of like an evolutionary biology type context, Jerry, long, long ago, our ancestors lived in jungles, actually slept in the trees at night for safety because with the wild animals. And back then, if you didn't pay attention to the things around, like the sound of a stick cracking, you likely didn't survive because all the people that did pay attention ran as fast as they could. Their fears were useful for survival. To survive in a jungle-like situation. And so that's about as best I can say. That I think the fear reactions of the ego had their place in that context. I don't think we have lions, tigers, and bears to fear anymore. Although we've replaced them with our other lions, tigers, and bears. They've changed form, and we still fear them in the same way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Kim, did you have something? If not, we'll go on. Okay, so we've said there's a second layer. What is the second layer? Have you intuited what it is? David?
What if you looked within and saw no sin? This fearful question is one the ego never asks. And you who ask it now are threatening the ego's whole defensive system too seriously for it to bother to pretend it is your friend. Those who have joined their brothers have detached themselves from their belief that their identity lies in the ego. A holy relationship is one in which you join with what is part of you in truth. And your belief in sin has been already shaken, nor are you now entirely unwilling to look within and see it not.
Mm-hmm. So the ego is really afraid that you would look within and recognize your holy nature within you, and that holy nature is shared with your brothers in a holy relationship. That threatens the ego's whole defense system so much that it arouses the ego, and it's not going to even pretend to be your friend. It says in another situation that the range of the ego, this somewhat speaks to Jerry's question a moment ago, the ego has a range of behaviors. On one end, it's suspicious, and on the other end, it's vicious. So that's the territory in which the ego operates. And when you seek to undermine its defense system seriously, it's no longer going to pretend to be your friend. So this is the thing that makes the ego tremble, that you would recognize the truth within you, and that you would begin to question your entire belief system that previously was oriented towards the ego's messages.
Your liberation still is only partial, still limited and incomplete, yet born within you. Not wholly mad, you have been willing to look on much of your insanity and recognize its madness. Your faith is moving inward, past insanity and on to reason. And what your reason tells you now, the ego would not hear. The Holy Spirit's purpose was accepted by the part of your mind the ego knows not of. No more did you. And yet this part, with which you now identify, is not afraid to look upon itself. It knows no sin. How, otherwise, could it have been willing to see the Holy Spirit's purpose as its own?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So a moment ago, Noel asked regarding the statement that we read, the ego is not alone. Well, what else is there? Well, there is also a part of your mind that the ego does not know and does not see, but it feels threatened by. This is the part of your mind that would be illuminated by the Holy Spirit. This would be a part that the Holy Spirit speaks for, is the messenger for. And this program of a course is, I'm going to use a metaphor here. This program is one from where previously we danced with the ego, and now we're disengaging from that partnership and dancing with the Holy Spirit. I'm using dancing as a metaphor here, you understand. And you can imagine if you were at a dance and you were dancing with one person and then just got rid of them for somebody else, that person would be very angry. And so this new partner is the one with which you now identify. And this new partner is not afraid to look upon itself, your true nature. It knows of no lack of love. It sees only love and peace and joy as being your eternal nature, your reality, your true self. And so it is this changing of partners is a process. It says here that your faith is moving inward past all the insanity, and that it's still limited and incomplete, yet born within you. So it's a process of divorcing all identification with the ego and uniting now with identification of the Holy Spirit. And it involves your thoughts, your beliefs, your faith. It involves where you've been putting your power for most of your life. And that shift is what this program is intended to help you with. Kim, you had your hand up.
So I'm glad I paused for a second because I was going to share before, but what I feel like we've read up until now is a process of denial and then coming out of denial.
Yeah.
Except because of the course now, this coming out of denial process is shame-free for me because of the atonement. And I just love that part of this course because I don't have to deal with it the way that I used to deal with it. Now I just completely, immediately give it to God. It's forgiven, all is well, and I don't have to spend a second on it.
That is a wonderful message, Kim. It's of shame-free letting go. There need not be, there's no sacrifice, no price of shame and pain and suffering to be paid. It's a heavenly gift. That's really helpful, Kim. Thank you for sharing that. Susie?
Yeah, and on that note, thank you, Kim, so much. On that note, it says in the course that we get glimpses, of peace and holy instance, but we still have more work to do, right? To make those moments more and more and more. So I don't get discouraged anymore either when my ego gets a hold of me and I have an ego meltdown or an ego hijack, and I'm like, oh my God, but I was feeling great last week and I had an holy instant, and where is it now? And I just have the faith now, though, and I wait patiently. And what I do is just keep doing my lessons, like Kim said, and I don't beat myself up. And I know, I have faith that healing is possible, and it's just the journey I'm on. I mean, it's not going to be undone after decades of thinking a certain way. So yeah, I have just more work to do. And that's why I think I'll be here forever, but it's a wonderful place to be because it's the only place I have found some true peace, even if they're just glimpses. And my goal is to just keep going so I have more and more and more instances of peace.
Lovely. Thank you for the testimony. Noelle?
Following from what Susie just said, to accept the hills and valleys and to forgive myself for the valleys is key.
Yes, and yes, and that reinforces also what Kim was saying. Now she's reached a new pattern of reacting that when letting go and forgiving herself has no shame associated with it. It's a gladness that I don't have to carry that anymore, rather than a feeling of regret and reflecting on the past in a way that seems to be missing out or anything, any grievances associated with it. It feels good to let go of grievances and guilt and judgment. And so it's forever these two voices, because the ego doesn't want you to feel good. And so that prompting may arise in your consciousness. And this is where learning to distinguish the ego's prompting from the spirit's is a necessary learning so that you know which one to trust. All right, so we said there are two parts, the spirit part and the ego part.
This part has seen your brother and recognized him perfectly since time began. And it desired nothing but to join with him and to be free again as once it was. It has been waiting for the birth of freedom, the acceptance of release to come to you. And now you recognize that it was not the ego that joined the Holy Spirit's purpose, and so there must be something else. Think not that this is madness, for this your reason tells you, and it follows perfectly from what you have already learned.
As David was reading, I just saw a third something else here. So previously we identified the ego, and it says it wasn't the ego that joined the Holy Spirit's purpose. And so there must be something else that agreed to join with the Holy Spirit. What is that something else? Some people would say that's you. And that would be a good beginning. We would, in course language, call that your free will, the part of you that has the power to change your mind and is free to believe and place your faith wherever you wish. That part of you is now being, there's a background message to this that would not be obvious here. In believing in the ego wants to suppress your free will, to cover it over and make it inactive. And so it becomes an imprisoned will, not a free will. And so what happens as we become aware of the light of vision of the Holy Spirit, our will starts to become free and really alive in a new way. It's like being reborn. It is like being reborn, recognized perfectly. It was always there, but it was not free. And so this is a process of attaining the freedom of your own will. The ego, that is the central barrier the ego would raise, is to keep your will from being free. Kathy?
Would another way of saying it be the decision maker joined with the Holy Spirit, like the internal decision maker, or is that something different than free will?
So Kathy asked a good question, and this is discussed much amongst Course in Miracle readers. Who is the decision maker? And most people would probably say yes, that the free will is the decision maker. And by the way, this is more an advanced question. Don't, if you're in your first few years, don't worry about it. But later on, Kathy, it tells us in heaven, there are no decisions to be made. You're not choosing between evil and good in heaven. You're not forgiving in heaven because there was never any judgment of guilt. And so the decision maker in Course in Miracles is the part of you that operates with perception and time. It's not the part of you that lasts forever. And so there's a distinction there. However, in time, most people will identify with a decision maker because they view themselves as living within and operating within a framework of time and space. That's not the truth, but that's the way it appears to be. It's a way of limiting our identity to say, I'm a time-space creature, versus the Holy Spirit will say, no, actually, you're an eternal being, unlimited and forever, that believes you're in a time-space matrix. And so I don't know, I might be making this more complicated for people. But it is an advanced question. Thank you, Kathy, for asking. Heather? You're muted. All right. maybe I can help out there. Heather, I see your hand up, but your microphone is muted. All right, we'll go on, and if you are able to fix that in comment later. So this is what brings us to the art that I thought would be helpful for today. I found this on the internet. I didn't create this. This is already out there. And so it's the truth that there is part of your mind that has accepted the Holy Spirit's purpose as your own. And this part is what the ego would keep hidden. And because it's essential to keep it hidden, otherwise you will, it's essential to the ego's purpose to keep this part of you hidden, your free will. Otherwise, you will disidentify with the ego and instead recognize who you truly are. We'll go on.
There is no inconsistency in what the Holy Spirit teaches. This is the reasoning of the sane. You have perceived the ego's madness and not been made afraid because you did not choose to share in it. At times, it still deceives you. Yet in your saner moments, its ranting strikes no terror in your heart. For you have realized that all the gifts it would withdraw from you in rage at your presumptuous wish to look within, you do not want. A few remaining trinkets still seem to shine and catch your eye, yet you would not sell heaven to have them.
Mm-hmm. So there's really hints of the sections to come in the remainder of this chapter, which have to do with a gift of the Holy Spirit called spiritual reason. And it turns out that when confronted with the message of the ego and the message of the Holy Spirit, you, as Kathy pointed out, have to make a decision. And how are you to decide which voice is the one that has your best interest in mind? Which one is true and believable? Well, spiritual reason allows you to discern that which is helpful from that which is harmful. It allows you to discern that which will bring peace from that which will bring conflict. And so the remainder of this chapter will explore more deeply how you can invite this gift of the Holy Spirit to become your own. Spiritual reason, how to reason on a spiritual plane so that one can discern that which is true from that which is false. We know that only the truth is true and that that which is false is forever false, but we have to distinguish the truth from the false. And the reason why we were here to begin with is that we became confused about what was false and we thought it was true. And so now to reverse that, we need the help of spiritual reason. Noel?
One touchstone for me, excuse me, is what feels better. Now, granted, sometimes the trinkets hold out allure, but the more I turn from them or sometimes indulge them and then find they don't give me any real happiness, then I can turn from them. And so sometimes for me, it's a matter of self-discipline too. Oh, maybe this trinket, maybe that one. But then I remember the past feeling not so good, and I turn more to the eternal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really helpful observation, Noel. If you think about it, yes, we can try these things and experience them and then gauge whether or not that was helpful and we want to do so again, or we don't want to do that again. However, that would be learning by direct experience. However, there are millions of forms and ways in which we uh, could experience, and it would take a lifetime of experience to decide, and then experience all those, and then to decide. And as you say, many times we have to experience it several times before we realize that this is harmful. So what I'm saying is that it takes a long time, and spiritual reason will allow you to understand without having to put yourself through the discomfort and the pain of learning by trial and error. And so that's what this course offers, is a chance to save time by not having to try every one of these things yourself, but by having the insights in advance of experience. So we'll still learn by experience, but on top of that, we're going to add spiritual reason that allows us to learn by watching what other people experience and not having to go through the same thing ourselves. It's actually, so this is all a preview of the next two sections that we'll be reading Sunday and Monday. Heather?
Yeah, that's the value of our brothers, because when, they get something, we don't have to go through it personally if we can learn from their experience. So that's just, it makes it so much more efficient and saves so much time.
Indeed. Indeed. This is about saving time. Time is precious. You only have your experience here on this world once. And so we want to be able to use it well. And now,
And now the ego is afraid. Yet what it hears in terror, the other part hears as the sweetest music, a song it longed to hear since first the ego came into your mind. The ego's weakness is its strength. The song of freedom, which sings the praises of another world, brings to it hope of peace, for it remembers heaven, and now it sees that heaven has come to earth at last, from which the ego's rule has kept it out so long. Heaven has come because it found a home in your relationship on earth. And earth can hold no longer what has been given heaven as its own.
mm-hmm. The earth, as you knew it under the ego's dictates, can no longer hold the gifts, the experiences that heaven now offers. This is sometimes thought and said to be the end of the world as you knew it. Understand, we're speaking metaphorically here. We don't mean that the planet comes to an end and there's no life on it anymore. We mean that the way you experience life on Earth shifts out of one that was dominated by ego fears into an experience of life that is directed by gentle Holy Spirit guidance. It's the end of the world as you knew it. And what comes to replace it? Heaven comes, because and it comes at your invitation because it found a home in your relationship on earth. And relationship here, again, refers to your holy relationship, your recognition of your own holy nature, the realization that all your brothers have that holy nature as well, and that that holy nature has its source in the creator. So holy relationship between creator and all members of creation. When you give that a home, your inner world experience, remember, this is about looking within, your experience of looking within, it says that you will be able to find the heaven within you. This is an old message, actually. It's the kingdom of heaven is within you. But what do you need to do in order to find it and experience it and realize it? You need to give a home to your holy relationship. And so that becomes really the vision of A Course in Miracles, is that you would give a home to the holy relationship within you, that you would identify with it. That would become your new, quote, dance partner. That would be the thing that you look to for hope. David?
Look gently on your brother, and remember the ego's weakness is revealed in both your sight. What it would keep apart has met and joined, and looks upon the ego unafraid. Little child, innocent of sin, follow in gladness the way to certainty. Be not held back by fear's insane insistence that sureness lies in doubt. This has no meaning. What matters it to you how loudly it is proclaimed? The senseless is not made meaningful by repetition and by clamor. The quiet way is open. Follow it happily and question not what must be so.
There's one of the things we learn, the Holy Spirit's purpose is to help us to distinguish illusions from the truth, where before we had difficulty distinguishing illusions from the truth. And one of the things that we learn is that the truth has certain attributes and illusions have different attributes. The illusions are proclaimed loudly. They shout with a demanding assertion that you pay attention. Many of the messages of this world come in that form. It's an insane insistence that you listen, while the truth of spirit is the quiet way. It's there, but it requires your willingness to turn and be open to the quiet way. David, you had your hand up?
Yes, I did. And what you just said really just struck me too, because, you said the illusions are making all the clamor and are there everywhere to distract me from seeing the holy instance, from experiencing the holy instant. They show me time. They show me form. They grasp my eyesight, if you will, and as opposed to my insight. But this jumped out at me. What matters to you, how loudly it is proclaimed. The senseless is not made meaningful by repetition and by clamor. And I'm sorry to bring this up, but I had to think of certain politicians who subscribe to the theory that a lie told enough times will be perceived as the truth. And that's so revealing in this course in the same way. And, everybody's talking about how sin and wrongness and how real everything is. And how could you do this? How could you do that? And, the question, what is wrong with you? And it's just, truth is truth. And that's what it says in our book. And sometimes it's very hard for me to get down and release all the trinket trappings. And I don't mean trinkets in the sense of what some people call trinkets. I mean the trinkets of thought, the trinkets of depth of thought and spirit. So this has really spoke to me. Thanks.
Thank you, David. I just want to but before that, Kim had her hand up.
So I love the part in this section that talks about free will. And it's such a beautiful shift from the world's teaching on free will, that usually free will leads to sin. This course teaches free will as a spiritual principle, not a world principle. And I just think that's so beautiful. It's a complete shift of what I was taught, what the world teaches. And I just love that it's being brought up here.
Yeah, thank you for underscoring that, Kim. I was taught, I read Intro to Philosophy, my first year in college, John Stuart Mill about free will. And it was the assumption that all human beings had free will. They weren't necessarily in a political economic situation where they were allowed to express their free will, but it was considered at that time to be an inherent in human nature that if you're alive, you had your free will. Then in Course of Miracles, it affirms that you have, all living beings have free will, but that on top of that come these layers and layers of lies that cage your free will, that imprison it, and therefore by imprisoning your free will, it is not free. It's an imprisoned will, and this cage is the ego thought system, and that if we are to be free, we must leave the cage, walk out, relinquish the ego's beliefs, the ego, withdraw our faith from believing in the ego and turn instead towards spirit. And that's what makes us free. Our choice to withdraw our faith from the ego and put it in spirit instead. That is a free will choice. So it is a very, this rewrites philosophy of thousands of years regarding the nature of free will by identifying the barriers, the obstacles to the awareness of love's presence. The barriers of the ego are obstacles, and they have to be removed in order that our eternal nature be realized and be experienced. I'm really grateful for this newfound perception that the Holy Spirit is revealing to us. Kathy?
Jonaca?
I'm sorry. Let's Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm glad this came up this morning, because I have this ongoing discussion with both of my kids, one more than the other. They do not believe in free will.
Okay.
They think we're programmed to do certain things no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep trying to explain, and I really, because I'm not doing a very good job of convincing them that we do have free will. But that was really very good this morning. Next time that comes up for discussion, I'm going to throw it out there for a discussion with them and see if it makes any difference.
Mhm.
But thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And you can understand how they might believe that we don't have free will.
Yeah,
If it's buried and imprisoned and caged, it seems like we are victims of the world around us.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's a deepening process to get in touch with freeing our will. Thank you, Jerry.
Yes.
Kathy?
Yeah, recently I experienced a freeing, and I just want to, there's a section of the course that talks about how things never really happened in heaven, that this illusion is here, but it's real with a little r instead of the big R. And I was able to look at something at work with my boss, and I was able to see he was doing the best he could. And I just left it at that, and I let it go. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to judge it. I didn't have to react or act. I just let it be. And I was free. Finally, after 6 years of dealing with this, I felt free. And I don't know, you might know this section better, Jonaca, that quotes that. It doesn't exactly say it never happened in heaven, but that's the idea. In eternity, this reality isn't seen by Holy Spirit. He translates it for us into truth, into lessons. But there is a section of the course that discusses that, and I don't know if you know where it is in the book to show people, but it was extremely helpful to me, and I feel free now of it.
Well, that's the part I really love that you shared, is now that you're free. Oh my goodness, that's all the reward one could ask for, is the feeling of not carrying these grievances or burdens anymore. It's really, that experience is what validates this path for us. You experience it firsthand, and you know that this is the better way, for sure. That is as far as we are going to read today. It's a shorter section. I promise you that the next two sections are profound and rich and elevate the conversation to a new level, because there are, how many gifts does the Holy Spirit offer us? Countless gifts. But if we're not aware of them, if we're unconscious of them, then we go around not using them. And so the purpose of the program here is to make us aware of these gifts of the Holy Spirit. I'm speaking about the gift of spiritual reason, and there are more beyond that, but those are the next two that are in this sequence of reading. David?
I'm not sure if I heard Jerry exactly correctly about what his kids were saying about whether that we have no free will and everything is predetermined or something like that. But what I love is, if we look at, if I was talking the way I talk to my kids and people I talk to, we all have free will to believe that there is free will or that there isn't free will. And that is our free will.
There you go. Proof. It's hard to argue with that logic.
It's a lot of reasoning there.
Yes, it is. Yes, it
You
is.
know. And so, as it says, the proper use of our free will is to turn it to God's will.
Yes. That is very true. So thank you. Any last comments before we wish you all a blessed weekend? Bonnie?
I think that many young people, in my experience, feel that because there are laws that they have to abide by in their world, that they don't have free will because they have to abide by certain rules and certain laws. And so they confuse that with having free will. But no society can function unless there are rules or laws. That's what I usually share with them. But there are in many other instances, they can exert their will. But no society is able to function without rules or laws. But they confuse the two.
Yes. There certainly is much confusion around this topic.
Yeah.
And another dimension of this is after World War II, there was so much damage and devastation. I'm talking about after the war ended. They were left Europe in ruins, 100 million people dead, more injured and traumatized. The sense of despair and hopelessness and nihilism, the sense that life has no purpose, swept the world as a outlook, as a way of looking at life as being meaningless, and that works hand in glove with the belief that we have no free will, that there's nothing worth trying for anyway. And so it's a devastating to the minds of young people to take away their hope,
Mhm.
take away the belief that there's any chance for hope. And so the Holy Spirit's response to all this is to offer her gifts of spiritual reason and hope and vision of a better way. As we read about it earlier in today, is to welcome heaven into the home of your holy relationship. Well, that's as far as we're going to go today. I want to thank everybody for your contributions and look forward to our getting together again real soon. Go in peace and don't be afraid to look within. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste, everybody.
Hey,
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good weekend.
See you all.
Thank you, David. Thank you,
Mhm.
Guru.
Peace and love.